So this particular journey began the same way that all great journeys do, with a little bit of good old-fashioned character customization. I got things started by slapping 5 kilos onto my frame, increased my height to 180 centimeters, and entered the middleweight division. Then I made my first name Agent, my second name 47, my nickname Assassin, and my social media handle Real Hitman, just to differentiate me from all of those not real hitmen on social media. And I made myself a Nigerian prince. After that, I made myself 18 years of age, so I'd have a nice long career ahead of me with which I could murder people in the octagon. I gave myself this ultra bouncy karate fighting style because I've been watching way too much Cobra Kai lately. Eagle Fang rules! And then I picked Eminem's Godzilla as my walkout track, knowing that none of us would get to hear it because copyright. After that, it was time for some heavy-duty plastic surgery, where I gave Agent 47 the spirit of a black man because we all know that white men can't jump. And if you're gonna fight like this, there's gonna be a lot of jumping involved. I waxed my chest, spent a really, really long time trying to decide why I shouldn't pick either of these two faces, and cracked out the old hammer and chisel to carve out the most perfect example of cosmetic surgery mastery in human history. This is what we ended up with. With that out of the way, I gave myself some beautiful bright blue eyes, spent way too long trying to figure out why I shouldn't pick this body shape, and finally settled on this one. Next, I picked the pastiest, most vitamin D deficient skin color the game had to offer, and proceeded to remove all of the ridiculously embarrassing and horrendously ugly tattoos that the game had given me by default, only to replace them with some worse tattoos, but this time, of my own making. I even got the highly sought after, I wish I was a bag of ding-dongs at the adult lifestyle supermarket barcode tattoo on the back of my head. Then finally I placed an order for my custom-made suit, which is to say that I proceeded to get 95% of my body tatted up with red and black ink, which I immediately regretted, but was clearly too brain dead to tell the tattoo artist to stop. Then I got some golden purple Muay Thai shorts, some sparkly rainbow gloves, and a Mexican mouthguard, despite being from Nigeria. Viva la Mexico! And lastly, I settled on kickboxer for my fighter type, which would give me an average stand-up game, a non-existent grappling game, and would make me mediocre in the health department, which was perfectly fine, because I'm untouchable anyway, as long as you don't count the warm-up match. Anyway, after getting about 30 years worth of brain trauma pounded into my head in the last fight, I headed into the local MMA gym to see if I could learn to bugger people up like a pro. As soon as I got there, I introduced myself to the bald loser that ran the joint, and immediately wondered what I was doing wearing a white t-shirt on top of my perfectly good suit that I had on underneath. My first lesson was on how to clown your opponent and make them first hate you, but eventually hate themselves. You do this by laying on top of them and slapping them in the face repeatedly, pretending to get back up, then bomb diving your crotch back onto theirs and slapping them in the face some more. You can do this ad infinitum until they die. And with that out of the way, it was time for my first proper, illegal cage match, where I kicked my opponent repeatedly in the shin until his leg snapped in half, and the fight was called off. Guess you could say he was as useless as a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest, because he had one leg. In my next fight, I decided to be a little more technical and mixed everything that I'd learned from my Muay Thai training with my wrestling training and turning a 3D face into a 2D stain on the octagon canvas training. Needless to say, after this one, my opponent would never ever be fighting again, unless it's on Super Nintendo or Mega Drive. Having won with such a dominant performance, I returned to the gym to hug my training partner on the floor for a while, and seeing as how I was obviously the next big thing in MMA, my coach invited UFC CEO Dana White to come and watch my next illegal cage fight, where I'd been promised a first-class, one-way ticket right into Dana White's Contender Series, and all I needed to do was kill a man. The fight started with me tricking my opponent into thinking I was actually a wiggly worm and not a world-class MMA fighter, in order to make him let his guard down. Then, once I'd convinced him that I was nothing more than a piece of spaghetti with a soul, I got him in the Muay Thai clinch and kneed him in the face repeatedly until his forehead became his backhead, and then finished off my masterpiece with a 1-2 high kick that flatlined him right in front of Uncle Dana, where I noticed for the first time that he actually had sausages for fingers. Now it's at this point in your UFC 4 career that you're required to choose how infuriatingly frustrated you want to get by the computer taking you to the ground and keeping you there by cheese denying every single transition you try to make against them until you inevitably lose. But being a huge proponent of self-inflicted pain and suffering, I finally went with Legendary, because I like being miserable. And just like that, I was in Dana White's Contender Series. The first thing I did was call in some random Chinese bloke to teach me how to kick people in the head for the very reasonable price of $22,500. It was alright though, because part of the deal involved him standing there like an absolute moron while I repeatedly landed these newly acquired vicious spinning side kicks to his head over and over again. He's dead now. Now, it was at this point in my career that my toxic masculinity really started to flourish. Matter of fact, the fights weren't even competitive, so what follows next is just a montage of my greatest hits in the amateur scene. So sit back and enjoy the next 20 seconds or so of nothing but beautiful elevator music and permanent brain damage. Now, after completely crushing every enemy that I went up against, it was time for me to fight for the Women's Fighting Association belt and to claim the title of baddest woman on the planet. In order to do that though, I'd need to take down the bearded lady, Preston Reeves. Fortunately though, I was able to use my sniper-like precision to land a couple of well-placed shots to the head and body and sent him flying to the canvas, where I buffed him in the face so many times that he was able to see behind him by the time the ref called the fight. And just like that, not only was I now a fully certified world-class plastic surgeon, but I was also the baddest woman on the planet. For some reason though, and by some reason I probably mean the completely brain-dead easy opponents that allowed me to rack up my win streak without breaking a sweat prior to entering the UFC, I continued to steamroll the promotion, even though I'd already steamrolled the moments before on my murderous run to the belt, until I'd ended everyone's career and life permanently. And then I agreed to join the UFC. My first contract was for $500,000 per fight, which made me immediately feel like a massive tosser for spending so long in a promotion that paid me $10,000 a fight. On the plus side though, I entered the UFC ranked number 7 in the middleweight division. Not a long road to go to get to the belt at all. But first I need to take down this rank 11 bozo who I was determined to buff in the head repeatedly until his facial features moved even further down his face. Preferably until all of them were on his chin. I got old Edmund in the Muay Thai clinch and kneed him in the mouth until his teeth turned into Tic Tacs. Elbowed him in the face until he swallowed them all. Landed a sweet spinning kick that sent his soul out of the arena. And then went for a cheeky 1-2 feint to make him slip to the right, where I kicked him so hard in the head that his brain flew out his left ear and hit Uncle Dana right in the face. Let's just watch that again from 3 different angles. He's never going to be the same after that. And now it was time for my next target. 42-year-old grandpa Derek Bumson.
He looks like a professional.
He dead. Matter of fact, he was so dead that with his final breath his soul tried to leave his body through his butt, but he farted instead. So stinky. I knew that if I wanted to continue plowing through the middleweight division like an absolute prawn star, I'd need some more spinny kicky things. So I paid $80,000 to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson to teach me some more spinny kicky things. Fortunately, my opponent MC Steroids didn't seem to have an answer to that particular attack and just let me do it ad nauseum until I was finally ready to kick him in the face and send him to the afterlife. Look at my floppy arms, Dana. Now, being in the middleweight division, I guess it was only inevitable that at some point I was going to need to fight Mr. Lasagna. The thing is though that in this alternate reality he was ranked number 4 and absolutely sucked ass. Anyway, it should come as no surprise to anybody that with a massively long chain of nothing but back-to-back wins, all by vicious knockout, I skipped the queue entirely and went straight to the title shot where for some strange reason, Kelvin Gastelum held the belt. But before going to kill a man in front of millions of people on live television, my coach came into the back room to give me a bit of a pep talk where he said stuff like, "Don't lose, you have some really stupid tattoos, and I'm actually your father and I hate you." We then bumped fists and got ready to go to work. Now, according to the game, this guy was both a world-class wrestler and had an iron chin, which to me sounded like they doubted I could beat him on the ground or on the feet. Guess they were wrong. Oopsie doopsie. And just like that, I was the UFC middleweight champ. Now give me the belt, Uncle Dana, you bald f***. Now, honestly, I thought I would have had at least, 24 hours to rest and let my victory as the middleweight champ sink in. But old mate Johnny Bones called up my agent and asked for a super fight the following day. Anyway, before heading into the octagon to whoop some more ass and add the light heavyweight belt to my collection, my coach came into the back room to give me a bit of a pep talk where he said stuff like, "You were a mistake, Put an actual shirt on, you idiot, and your mum is Chris Cyborg. Now I finally understand where I get my baldness and my killer good looks from. I walked into the octagon like an actual person. John Jones didn't. Then he proceeded to sit on my chest and punch me in the mouth repeatedly, all while whispering really sus things while he licked his lips and winked at me. I liked it. Then I slipped his body kick and swooped in with a devastating overhand that left him bamboozled. After that, I gave his nose a first-class ticket to his forehead. No quarantine required upon arrival. And finally, a savage spinning kick to the head, followed by some hot, sweaty man-on-man ground-and-pound action that left him gasping for breath. Hope it was as good for him as it was for me. And that right there is the story of how I became both the middleweight and light heavyweight champ of the UFC, by way of something like 25 wins, 0 losses, all by savage knockout and on the hardest difficulty that UFC 4 has to offer. Guess it's time to head back to the ICA now. Laters!